This is the Vision 79 podcast where my friend Sander and myself, Mason, discuss recent developments in our business and personal growth. The name Vision 79 comes from our respective racing numbers. Sander's is 40, mine is 39, and we have a shared vision for success in business and our personal lives. Many successful people started small, just like us, but very few of them documented their process. We intend to be the first to document our journey from start to finish. We'd like to start every episode with a brief update of how business has been going for us lately. So in the future, when we're looking back, we recognize what point of our lives we're at. And I have a couple notes. It was kind of a slower week for the business stuff, but we still got a lot of things done in the money-making side of things. The first thing we did was file our sales and use tax for Kahuna Cravings, our first business. That was a lot easier than I thought it would be. I've not had much luck with ease when working with the Department of Revenue, but we were able to do it all online, and I haven't been arrested yet, so I'm assuming we did it right.
I think it's good.
Yeah. The security companies I've contacted have been blowing up my line, contacting me for like demos and shit, and I still have to schedule some of those to do, but I think I've narrowed it down to the top 2 or 3 companies.
Cool.
And then you have the 335i listing almost finished for us to sell the BMW that we went on together to flip.
Videos are done, with photos done, regular photos done.
Yeah,
description is done. Yeah, it all looks good. It's just got to be uploaded.
It is leagues and bounds better than every other listing on Cars and Bids. And the Cars and Bids listings are generally so much better than Facebook Marketplace, Cars.com, AutoTrader, those listings. So I'm really excited for that.
Yeah.
We bought the car for what we thought was a really great deal. We put a little bit of money and work into it, and now we're going to sell it for a profit. And we're going to post the content that we filmed with it on all of our platforms to try and get as many eyes on it as possible. It's likely going to be a no reserve auction, so there's no minimum price that it has to sell for. And we're really hoping that we can get a lot of money for it. And if that's the case, maybe this is a process we can do repeatedly or help others with as well and monetize that.
Yeah.
Those are my business updates for this week. Do you have anything to add?
Random car work. I've been diagnosing some stuff on the 530i. It's looking like I have a CAN bus communication issue with some wires that run along the driver's side carpeting underneath. CAN bus it's like the communication network for the car. So it's like CAN bus is why in modern cars every single gauge doesn't have separate wires that go to it.
Okay.
CAN bus is like the fly-by-wire framework.
Okay. So what does it mean that you have problems with it? What's not working?
It's not communicating with the OBD2 port. So I can't read any of the modules besides DME, because DME is it has the opportunity to go through a separate system other than just straight through the cluster and through CAN bus.
And that's the scanner that you used the other day
and the Autel at Autobarn. They do the same thing. So there's a junction point underneath the driver's seat that these 3 CAN bus wires come together, and they're supposed to join and ground each other. And they go to this plastic block that over time will corrode on the inside. Smart. And so they'll break apart and they won't connect anymore. You won't be able to get readings off of the OBD port. That's a pretty common issue. So I'm going to dig into that at some point. It's not an urgent thing, but I was trying to figure out what was going on.
Okay.
But I have a pretty good idea of that.
The only impact there is that when we sell the car, it's like, hey, you can't read the OBD2?
Correct.
Okay. Got it.
Well, this is not the 335.
You said it was.
No.
This is the 530? Okay. Got it. You misspoke.
No,
okay,
I said
cool.
530.
I think we'll run it back and you said 335.
I'm pretty sure.
Because we were just talking about the 335 and you were talking about the listing. And then you were like, the OBD2. And I was like, wait, what's happening?
No, the 335 is fine.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Got it.
530.
Well, for the 530, you're not looking at selling it anyways. And you have the Autobahn scanner or whatever, which is better anyways.
Right? Yeah.
No big deal.
So, no big deal. I was just trying to figure out what it was, taking some data down. And Miata's back up and running now.
What was wrong with it?
Cooling fan relay.
Oh, yeah.
And the fuse blew too. They both blew.
Yeah.
Got your car back up and running.
Yeah, my car problems came back. My electric water pump stopped working altogether. Everything looked fine. Everything worked fine. But apparently the fuse connector was bad. So Sander wired in a new fuse connector for me.
Yeah.
And a new fuse. So now we're getting into the life update stuff. Is that wrapped up on the business side of things? A lot of editing and things. My car problems came back and then went away again. I bought a desk because I'm anticipating that the closer we get to launching our business, the less work I'll be able to do or will want to do at the bar, just because it's sensitive information and I need a place to work at home. And I find that I'm spending more money than I probably should at the bar right now because it's the only place that I work. So I bought a desk. It comes in Monday, and then I can start doing a little bit more work from home. Even if it's like a couple hours and then I still go back to the bar, I'll be spending less. And
that's what I've started to do. Like sometimes I'll go, if I really feel like I want a tea from Paulana or Kraken, I'll just go home.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to spend money. I probably buy maybe 1 tea a week at this point.
Yeah.
And everything else I just do loyalty.
Yeah.
You know, and the bartenders bug me. Like every 30 minutes they come around and ask me if I want anything for the course of 3 hours.
Yeah.
And you just have to get used to saying no.
Yeah.
But it sucks.
Yeah. But, well, I mean, wait, what sucks? Not being able to buy the drinks or having them bug you?
Not being able to buy the drinks.
Got it.
I don't really have an issue with them bugging me. I don't have a problem saying no.
Yeah.
It just stinks not being able to buy the drinks because I do like the drinks.
Yeah, I hear you. Money's getting sensitive. And on that note, I just dropped $1,500 buying a gun and getting my concealed carry license. But I have it, and I'm super happy with it, and my holster comes in soon, so I can start carrying on me all the time, and I'm super stoked. But that went well. I learned a lot from the concealed carry course. They teach you a lot about like the law and what is and isn't allowed. And because my mom always
grew up... Are you allowed to bring that on Northrop Grumman campus?
No.
Okay.
The rules are private businesses can set their own rules. But generally speaking, like a great example is this. Buffalo Wild Wings has no firearm signs. You're not allowed to take it in, right? Mm-hmm. You can take it in still because legally you're allowed to. But if they ask you to leave, you have to leave. Northrop Grumman, since it is a secure facility and works with the government, you can't bring it. You can't even have it on campus. So I can't even leave it in my car.
Yeah.
Which is fucking, I don't understand that because the security is not what it should be, in my opinion, at that facility. So like, whatever. But yeah, it's schools, the work positions like that, government offices, and things of that nature. Interestingly, you cannot bring it on into college if you're a student. But if you're an adult, you can, which is odd. You can't bring it into the lecture halls and stuff, but you can leave it locked in your car, which is interesting. But I grew up with my mom always being like anti-gun. And she was like, you know, even if you shoot somebody, you're still going to go to jail and whatever. And I was like, I don't think that's true. Like there have to be instances in which you can defend yourself and not go to jail. But what I found most interesting about this course was something that they call a duty to retreat. Are you familiar?
No.
I was not. So Florida's a stand your ground state, right? Which means that if someone threatens you with deadly force, you're allowed to defend yourself, right?
Yep.
My mom always told me that's just in your house or car. You can't do that everywhere. That's false. You can do it everywhere because we in Florida, as Florida residents, do not have a duty to retreat. Other states like Massachusetts and New York, I'll let you figure out what colors I'm talking about there. Citizens have a duty to retreat, which means if you're in a gas station, right, and you're in the checkout line and a dude runs up with a ski mask on and points a gun at the cashier and says, give me all your money, right? You and the cashier have to first try to retreat or run away before you're allowed to fire on that person. You cannot defend yourself if you don't first try to escape, which is ridiculous because as soon as you turn your back,
they're just going to shoot you.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
just take, or they'll just take the cashier, I guess, but like the cash in the cash register.
Well, here's the thing: if you try to run, odds are they shoot you in the back, right? And if you escape, then you never needed a gun in the first place because you escaped, right? Yeah. But in Florida, you checking out are allowed to take deadly force against the guy robbing on behalf of the cashier. Mm-hmm. You're allowed to do that because it's a stand your ground state. You don't have a duty to retreat. And I thought that was super interesting.
I mean, that makes more sense because, you know, by retreating, you put yourself in a risky position because if the person trying to get the money from the cash register is like, oh, he's running back to call the cops, then he'll just pop him. You know what I mean? So that puts you in a really tough position.
Yeah. Interestingly, also, if you're in your car and someone presents as trying to break into your car, you can defend yourself. Even if they're not in your car, you can, right? But if you're at home sleeping and your blink camera goes off and you see someone trying to break into your car on your property, you cannot use deadly force unless it's presented against you. So even though it's on your property and they're breaking into your property, and when you're in your car and someone's trying to break into your car, you can defend it. You cannot use deadly force. You have to wait for them to present a gun or some other use.
What if you were to approach them and be like, hey, stop doing that?
That's allowed.
And then if they attack you, then you're allowed to defend yourself.
Exactly. The general rule is like they have to show aggression first, right? This is similar with the American military. When we're overseas, you cannot fire unless fired upon, right? But what I found interesting was it's on my property, right? So they're trespassing and they're breaking into my property, and that property, the car, is like I'm allowed to defend it when I'm in it. So why can't I defend it when I'm out of it, right? But generally speaking, you say, hey, that should scare them off. If it doesn't scare them off and they, brandish a weapon, then you can fire.
I think the difference is the type of theft that you're talking about, right? Because when you're talking about when you're in a car and someone's attacking you, there's plausible cause that they are trying to attack you personally, not to steal the car. When you're not in the vehicle, then it could be said that, oh, well, they were just trying to steal stuff, which I think would be considered more petty theft.
I think so too.
Right. I think that's the discrepancy.
Right. I think so too. I think that's the reason that it is the way it is. My personal belief is if you're trying to steal from me, I should be allowed to shoot you. But I understand the law is the law, right?
Right.
Interestingly, there was a case that they talked about in the course where a man was in bed asleep with his family and he heard the front door get kicked in. So he ran out. There was a man in his living room and he shot him, right? Turns out the man was there to rob them and maybe hurt them. He had a weapon on him as well. Right. So the police came at the scene. They were like, it's not your fault. You're good. Go back to bed. We'll clean up everything, whatever. Right. Everything was fine. 4 months later, he's filed a lawsuit against the son who's suing him for child support because you killed my dad. The guy who broke in was his dad. Right. And he lost the lawsuit and had to pay $70,000 child support to this kid.
Why?
I don't know. I haven't looked into
really good lawyers, I guess.
I haven't looked into it. But the guy in the course referred a lawyer to me because I asked about it. I was like, dude, like, who is your lawyer? Because I'm going to need to talk to somebody if I ever get into a situation like this. I simply will not have it. And the lawyer that he referred to me, I think it was something Diamond. Let me pull
Alan Diamond?
It was Alan Diamond.
That's the guy I'm working with.
He's the guy who he recommended to be your lawyer. So I guess you found a good one.
No, he is very good.
Yeah.
No, he's good. I'm not going to talk about the case on air because it's still pending.
I'll talk about it for him.
My conversations with him have been informative.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
Yeah. So that's the guy he recommended. So I'm going to keep his number on me in case I ever get into anything. He also had a great
I used to work on his cars.
Really?
Yeah. Well, that's how I know him. He's Autobahn. He drives a variety of things. I think the day that I saw him last, he was in an E-Class, Mercedes E-Class.
I like the guy.
Yeah, he's had some other stuff too. He's always driven nice cars. He's always been a very nice guy. He's good.
Cool. Well, in that instance, when I get in trouble, I'll call him up and say, "Hey, my friend's at Autobahn," and then I'll get in with him. But
yeah, he's cool.
Something interesting.
Very nice.
Something interesting that the guy said in the class. He was like, "Anytime there's an incident, call the police and report it to them. Right? Even if you don't shoot, if you have to brandish your weapon, or even if you saw someone else do it, always call the police and report it. Right? But you want to tell them." You want to give them an introduction, right? My name is XYZ. I'm at the Wawa next to a beige truck, right? And then you leave the middle part vague. What actually happened, you leave vague, right? Someone came in with a weapon and I had to defend myself. Leave it at that. And then you say, I'll be here with my hands on my steering wheel waiting for the cops to get here or something, thank you. And then you hang up. Hang up. Because the more that you say, when they say what you say can and will be used against you in the court of law, they mean that because you're not legally allowed to use that in your defense, but they can use it against you. So whatever you say on the call to 911, whatever you make in your statement to the police, you can't use that to your benefit in the court of law, but they can use it against you, which I think is kind of fucked. But his whole thing was, don't say anything. Just say you're going to wait for your lawyer, but still notify them of the situation. I thought that was a good lesson because in your situation, maybe you mentioned a little more than you should have or a little less than you should have, or maybe you were confused. But I think that going forward, it's great to leave it vague, and now you have a lawyer to call.
Yeah, no, this whole experience has been a real learning experience for me.
For me too.
It's been valuable.
Yeah.
In many ways, and then obviously painful and challenging in many other ways.
Right.
So. But, overall, you live life and you push through.
Yeah. I thought that was a great lesson that I learned from your experience and then was reinforced by this. And it gave me an actual action to take, which is keep the lawyer's number on you. Because if, God forbid, I do have to shoot somebody, I want to go through the legal process correctly, right? And I don't want to risk an instance like that guy who shot the dude in his living room. I don't even know what he did wrong to have to pay this kid child support. But I don't want to have to defend myself and then pay someone else for it, right? If you're threatening my life, I need to be able to defend myself and not worry about being sued.
Yeah.
So those are my life updates that I have. I have several quotes this week, but I'll let you take the first one because I've been talking a lot.
No worries. I got some Robert Kiyosaki points with some questions tied to them.
Me too.
This first thing I wanted to know your thoughts on. I went back into the 4-quadrant book that you wrote.
Yeah.
And there is essentially 4 different categories of people, for those of you who are not familiar, the 4 quadrants of people: employee, self-employed, investor, and businessman or business entrepreneur. And he thinks the S quadrant is the most risky because a self-employed individual is the most risky path, because a self-employed individual will work the hardest for the longest. And even if they succeed, they will feel overworked and underpaid. But the path of being self-employed and then going into business is the recommended path, because you take a lot of your skills in being self-employed and then applying them to business. And so successful business people often are also better investors. Successful business people can afford to take financial losses in the investment quadrant, which is important for becoming an investor. And money comes from mistakes. And in the I quadrant, or the investor quadrant, mistakes cost money. So it's important to have that capital as being a business person. And technology makes the business quadrant easier to achieve.
These are a lot of quotes.
Right? So, yeah, there's a bunch of points here. This is mostly a fill-in for the audience. If you're not familiar with this kind of structure, you can listen back to that excerpt and kind of get a gist of what the E, S, I, and B quadrants are. But my questions regarding this are, we had a little bit of a flavor regarding self-employment when we were doing Kahuna Cravings, right? Now, what are the main skills you think that you will take from that experience of running Kahuna Cravings that you will then be able to apply once we are more businessmen rather than self-employed people?
The skill to delegate. I never, ever want to be working in a business and not on a business. I always want to be working on the business and only work in it in case of emergency. Yeah. So if we go back and decide to grow Kahuna Cravings, great, we're doing it with employees. This new business that we're doing, awesome, I'm excited, we're doing it with employees. I understand why Kiyosaki has the opinion that he does, that the self-employed people feel that they work the hardest and are paid the least. And it's because it's true. You're running a whole operation single-handedly or with a small group of people, and it's just not sustainable to do all of the production and marketing and selling and delivery all yourself. Like, it's just not feasible. So I think that the biggest skill that I would take from that is delegation of labor. It's difficult coming from college where you're told to do all of the work and do it well, to outside where it's like, hey, the work needs to be done well, but you don't have to be the one to do it. So finding somebody who you can trust to do the work properly and then putting that trust in them to actually execute it correctly isn't an easy step for a lot of people to take, but it's one that I have absolutely no issue taking now, because it's like, I find if you can't hire employees from the get-go, if you start it yourself, it's so much more difficult to start doing it on your own and then get employees than it is to start with employees, like we're doing the second business. That I predict that this business is going to be way more successful because we're starting off with the help that we need and the manpower that we need instead of trying to do it all on our own.
Do you think that's because when you start from a self-employed person and then try to grow into a business, you have certain way of doing things and certain kind of routines that are unique to you, and then once you get an employee, they have their own way of doing things, and it's really hard to offload the work because you see them doing it in a different way, versus when you start a business with employees right off the bat, they start right off the bat from doing their stuff their own way, and you don't really have a concrete way of doing it yet, so you kind of mesh better. Do you think that's the reason why?
I don't think so. I think it's startup capital. Because when we hire our employees for this new business, we're going to tell them the way that we'd like it done. And then they're going to do it that way. They'll put their own spin on it. That's fine. But generally speaking, if you're self-employed, think of like a lawyer, right? Like you start your own practice and you make enough money to feed yourself, right? To grow, you need to not only make enough money to feed yourself, but to also pay a secretary. And then you need to hire on another lawyer who you'll have to pay him for a little while until he can start making his own money in the business and then go from there. Or if there's a finite amount of products to be sold, then they have to also make more product and go out and sell it. Like it takes a lot more initial catalyst to get it going. But with this new business, we're starting with a lot more money. So we're able to lay the foundation and hire employees and tell them how we want it done from the get-go. We don't have to run the place ourselves for however long it takes to make the amount of money to hire an employee. I think that's the main blocker, is you've got to have the money to hire them, or they have to be able to make their money like out the gate.
So you think it's less possible that when you're self-employed, you are able to generate the capital to get employees?
I think generally speaking, yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
I think generally speaking. That was my problem with Kahuna Cravings mainly, was that we weren't making enough money, like A, to pay ourselves, or B, to pay employees. And an argument could be made that, well, when you hire employees, they'll make their own money to pay themselves. But even at that point, like, we're not making money anymore. Like, I think it would have to be built with a stronger foundation with more money to warrant employees, so that we don't have to be paid as much while it grows, to allow the employees to be paid more to hire more employees. That's my feeling.
I hear that too. Yeah, I see the point.
Yeah.
I think I'll take away the ability to persevere through a task. You know, like
punching labels.
Yes and no. You know, like I think pushing through tasks that sometimes aren't very enjoyable for an outcome that you feel happy with, I think is something that I'll take away. I think I've gotten that from other things in life too. Mm-hmm. But I think that's, from a business sense at least, that's the first time from a business that I've felt that.
Yeah.
I think I'll take away a lot of like logistical and analytical things about, you know, filing certain paperwork and taxes and lawyers and accounting, mm-hmm. you know, just basic overall premises.
Yeah.
And then I think one that I'll take away that's not directly related to Kahuna Cravings, but I gained in the process of Kahuna Cravings, is entrepreneurial resources. I think that I found a lot of great podcasts, you know, that you found as well, a lot of great books and resources and websites online, and other stuff like that in creating Kahuna Cravings, that I think that knowledge I'll be able to take with me going into this next business.
Yeah.
And so it's not directly related to Kahuna Cravings, but still something that Kahuna Cravings was a vehicle for.
That was an output. Kahuna Cravings was also a vehicle for seeing customer satisfaction at the personal level, which I really like. I think that a lot of people in business, like Jeff Bezos, probably doesn't give a rat's ass if I enjoy my experience or not, right? But he probably does, right? I feel like a lot of people are like, when you own a business that big, you don't really care about the person, right? But in owning a small business like that, like, we were the people to hand the product to the customer in exchange for cash and watch them smile. And that was a great interaction.
Yeah.
And when we aren't supplying it to people, we have people asking about us when we're not able to supply the product. And that's a good feeling, because it shows that we're actually providing value and something that people like. They're not buying it because they're nice. They're buying it because they enjoy it. And that gives me the confidence to scale up like we're doing now with this business, and do it on a larger scale and supply to more people. That's what I like. I feel like you don't get that when you're in a larger business or even an online business, like with drop shipping. Like, if you're just like pressing buttons and mailing orders, you probably don't really, you're a little disconnected from the customer satisfaction side of things.
I kind of like that side of things too, though. Like, there's a part of me that likes that side of things because it is completely reliant on you and your performance, right? And I guess that one-on-one customer interactions are too, right? But there's an extra piece to the feedback loop or to the success loop when you're interacting with a customer, because it's not just about you and how you sell it and your product. It's also about, you know, the customer approach, and there are other factors at play. Maybe they're having a bad day or a good day or whatever. Like, there's other factors at play that determine how successful your sale is to that person, or how much you help them that day with whatever product you sell. Versus with dropshipping, there's a great disconnect between your customer base and you. So kind of the only things you look at are the things directly within your control. I feel like, you know, like you look at your advertising, you look at your product, you look at like what your website looks like and your pricing. And it's all kind of like in your little bubble. Like, as long as there's somebody buying on the other end, you're good. You know what I mean?
I
Versus
think
like there's a deeper connection with like in-person sales that I think adds another layer to it. And I enjoy both sides of it, but
I'm not talking about sales really. I mean to say, like, if you could put a camera in the box with your drop shipping item and then watch the customer become happy when they receive your product, that's what I like. Not like the act of in-person sales, but just the act of watching the customer enjoy a product that I made with my hands. That's what I get. That's what I enjoy.
Yeah. I hear that.
Yeah.
You want to hit a point?
Yeah. My first quote is a Hormozi quote.
Cool.
A lot of mine today are about hard work and deserving the work that you do.
I think I have
the work that you do.
Oh, I have. My last point is actually related to that.
Yeah, that's good. My last one's a strong one, so we'll end it close to there. But the first one is from Alex Hormozi, and he's talking about people who are complaining to him, and they're like, "But Alex, I really don't have time." And he goes, "Okay, you're right, and you'll never achieve the success that you want, and it's not your fault. Does that feel better?" Right. I didn't think so. And there are so many people who will complain and whine about their situation. I don't have enough money. This is biased against me. It's not fair. I didn't have the opportunities. I don't have the time. Etc. And at the end of the day, all you can really say is like, all right.
What's your point?
Yeah. What's your point? And like, how does that serve you? And I've been talking to Grace about this a lot lately too, because the more I listen to Hormozi, the more I think to myself, like, reality is just whatever the fuck you want it to be, right? Like, none of this is fucking real. Like, you can look at any situation and take whatever you want out of it. And if that's the case, why not spin it all to benefit you? Like, why not spin whatever situation you're in to serve you? Because otherwise, it's not fair and you hit a dead end. It's like when you do improv, the whole thing is like, I say something and then you say yes and then you go on with the next thing, right? Because if you say no, it stops.
Right.
And I don't want this to stop. Like, I don't want business to stop. So I'm going to continue to learn lessons and, grow myself instead of just saying like, well, fucking, I guess because I didn't grow up with a dad billionaire, I'll never be a billionaire.
Yeah. It's easier to complain about your situation than it is to do something about it.
Yeah.
And it's sad to see, but it's not sad enough to see for me to want to change everyone's opinion about it.
Yeah.
Like I still got to focus on myself and the own things that we're doing and, what we're making happen, what we're, creating. I got to focus on those things. I can't change everyone's opinion about it, but at least I hope that with a podcast and with people who meet me, they get a flavor of what it might be like to change your mindset, and I hope that people take what we put out and what so many other great entrepreneurs put out, like Alex Hormozi and Robert Kiyosaki and, Jordan Peterson and the Modern Wisdom podcast and so many other great resources out there, and kind of take those pieces of information and use them as they will and try to better themselves.
Yeah.
Because there have been some times in my life where I've been the person complaining, and sometimes quickly and sometimes not so quickly, I realized that complaining about the situation wasn't going to make it better. I think one thing that I used to really complain about when I was young, like, this was like 6 or 8, was my parents were always separated. So it was like I always complained about, having to switch houses and dealing with different parents with different, thoughts and opinions of a variety of issues. So that was always something I kind of, that kind of hurt me. But eventually I was just like, you know what, this is the life I have. These are the cards I've been dealt. And I'm just going to live it to the best and deal with problems as they come. There's no point to whine about them when they aren't right in front of my face needing to be addressed.
Yeah. I don't think I made the connection until someone actually said it, like, out loud. The quote was, whining is complaining with no proposed solution. Yeah. And I was like, dude, I don't want to be a whiner. And then I started to pay attention to what I say. And I was like, dude, I bitch about a lot of shit. And there's like, sometimes it's like, man, it's fucking hot out today and I don't like that. Okay, cool. Like, that's whining because you're complaining and there's no proposed solution. But like, the solution to that is make it cold outside. No,
Yeah.
like there is no solution. So just kind of put up with it and
Right.
don't complain because people don't want to hear that shit, right? Hormozi has something about shoes. He's like, don't complain about the price of shoes. Buy them or don't. Leave it at that. Accept the
Right.
price and enjoy the shoes, or don't buy them and leave it, right? So if it's hot outside, sweat and get over it, or go inside and be cold
Yep.
or cooler, I guess.
Yeah, I got some, like, I can't remember the first time I started getting, well, probably when I was like 16 or 15, I started getting like social media feed that was related to entrepreneurship and business. I think the first people on my feed were like guys like Ty Lopez. Did you ever get any of him on your feed?
Dude, mine was always like cars and tits.
Yeah.
Mostly my feed.
Yeah, there was this one guy, Ty Lopez, who was an entrepreneur. He still is an entrepreneur. And I don't really know. I've heard a lot of sketchy things about him, and I've heard a lot of, good things about him. So I'm not really sure where
what's he known
sits.
for?
Maybe business and real estate, I think, primarily.
Okay.
Is what he delves into.
Was he the guy who everyone was like, you rented that Lamborghini for the photo shoot and you live in the house?
The black Lamborghini with the bookcases on the wall, and he was like, I read a book a day. He was that guy.
I don't think I remember his face, but I remember hearing about this. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of like 50-50 messaging. But, the point for me wasn't whether he was legit or not. The point was that there was someone out there making an amount of money that I couldn't fathom in a timeline that was unthinkable to me.
Yeah.
And that's when I was like, oh, there's something more than just like working at Stop and Shop. I was like, what? And I was pretty young at that point.
How far are we from reaching Jeff Bezos' net worth?
How far away are we at this current rate?
2.5 million years.
Yeah, many millions of years.
Yeah, 2.5 million.
Yeah.
See our last podcast. So that's my Hormozi quote. I've got like 4 more, but let's do another one of your Kiyosaki ones first, or whatever you want to do.
So this is actually related to what we just talked about a little bit too. But another Robert Kiyosaki point, there are 5 things that happen to people who don't invest or invest poorly. 1, they work all their lives. 2, they worry about money all their lives. 3, they depend on others all of their lives. 4, the boundaries of their lives are defined by money. And 5, they will not know what true freedom is. And so my question is what do you think is the primary factor for why people choose this path rather than the path of investment and business education / action?
The last one is interesting about them not really knowing what true freedom is, because freedom is relative, I think.
Yeah.
I feel that freedom is relative. But generally speaking, I think freedom is the lighthearted feeling of not having to worry. And I feel that with many people, not having money yields worry.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting one. But what was the question again?
What do you think is the primary factor for why people choose this path, a path of not investing or investing poorly, rather than a path of wise investment and business education / action?
I think it's too daunting for most people because you're not trained in business. You're not, like, most people don't know how people make money, and they don't even think about it. Like, they don't even think how billionaires exist because you assume, since you weren't taught about it in school, that they're special, that they grew up with special parents or someone knocked on their door and did it for them, or they won the lottery. Though, funny enough, the majority of lottery winners are broke less than 3 years after they win.
Yeah.
I think, and I was one of these people. When I met you, I was like, I'm going to be an engineer, and that's what I'm going to do. And then you were like, don't you ever like consider making more money? And I was like, what do you mean? And you were like, well, there are people out there who make more money. How do you think they do it? And I had never really asked myself that question. I'd always assumed like, well, maybe they invest good or something. I don't know. I don't know anything about the stock market. So like, maybe I won't ever invest. But then I learned that there's multiple ways to invest, not just in the stock market. And that, I don't think there are very many engineers who are billionaires. And
no, probably not unless they're CEO.
I know there are a lot that are millionaires, but I think that's because they're smart people and they got out of engineering.
Or they stayed in engineering for 34 years.
Yes, correct.
Like someone who has a salary of, 250, 300K.
Yeah.
They're going to have $1 million net worth.
Right.
For sure.
Right. I think that the likelihood is, for the most successful ones, it's they're engineers. They were taught the same system of thinking that we did, and then they applied it to business like we are. But like we will always be engineers from here on. Like we have the degree, we will always be engineers. I just plan on being a billionaire as well, right? Maybe not in the engineering field. But I think that the largest thing is it's just daunting. Like there's a whole world that I didn't know existed until I asked this question. I don't know anybody in that world. I don't know how they do it. And if I did know how they do it, I don't know if I could do it, right? You need money, you spend money to make money, and I don't have any money, something like that. I don't have any time. I have a kid. I have families. I got a dog to feed. I don't know. Pick your excuse. But a lot of people, it's kind of like saying, hey, now you're graduated, right? You have your degree in mechanical engineering and you're working at, NASA, right? But what if you decided to pursue a career in politics, right? You wouldn't know the first place to start. It's like, okay, maybe you run for like city council or something, but I don't know how to run for city council. I don't know what a campaign is. I don't know what local politics look like. What's the end goal? Who do I need to shake hands with? Like, what babies do I have to kiss? How do I get there? I don't know. Do they make any money? Like, it's a whole world that doesn't exist to you, and you don't even consider it because you're doing what you're doing and you're making enough money to feed yourself, right? I think it's just too daunting for people.
I think it's a hard leap. I think that employee positions are framed as a safe net.
Yeah.
And despite the fact that I honestly don't think that they're really a safe net, if you think about it, right? If you're an employee, you are reliant on your boss liking your work. You're reliant on your coworkers liking you. You're reliant on your program or company or job not going bankrupt. You're reliant on the company you're in continuing to be valuable as times and technology progresses. So you're dependent on all these external factors that you have little to no control over. Versus in a business, if you're the owner of that business and you run that business, you have full delegation and control of what happens. Even if you make stupid decisions and you make mistakes, you still made those decisions and made those mistakes.
Yeah.
And so I think that, this idea that the traditional job is a safety net is, I think it's bogus. I think it's sad, and I think it's pushed onto the American public in a way that, isn't to their true benefit. I think that, and as Robert Kiyosaki has said too, everyone fits into one of these groups, and every single one of these groups is necessary. And the four groups being employee, self-employed, investor, or businessman. So there's people for each group, and they're all important to the growth of the economy and the stability of the world around us and, progress, right? So to each their own. But I think my point being is that if you are sitting there complaining about your current state, there's really no reason to complain. You should be taking action because it's easy enough to take action. You have infinite wealth of resources online. Even if you tried to watch every single resource out there about business, you'd probably spend the rest of your life trying to track them all down because there's so many great resources out there, and so it's like, if you put your mind to it and you do something about your current situation, that's awesome. But don't sit there and complain about it, and don't tell yourself that an employee job is just my safety net, because it's really not if you fundamentally think about it.
That's why they call it social security, because they want you to feel secure.
Right.
But it's a fucking scam.
It is.
Most people don't know that because they don't think critically. We just watched the presidential debate, and I feel like they really leverage the people will listen to what I say, even if what I say isn't true, because people are not largely capable of thinking critically. But it's an interesting point that you make about how if you run a business, you're in control, even if you make dumb mistakes. It's not guaranteed success. You have to make the right decisions, but you're in control.
Yeah.
Grace and I were talking about parasailing the other day. Do you know what parasailing is?
Yeah, that shit terrifies me.
Dude, me too. I'll tell you why. You put a harness on and you're in a boat and you jump out of the boat and the parachute catches wind, and then you hold on to the...
I've actually done this before.
What?
I actually did it once with my mom. I did parasailing in Puerto Rico with my mom.
That's
I just remembered that.
I never would. Yeah.
It was scary.
You blocked it from your memory.
It was really pretty though.
So
like looking down in the water with the fishes and stuff. It was cool.
So this is an interesting conversation on risk, right? Because Grace was like, I would love to go to the Keys with you and go parasailing. And I was like, I would love to go to the Keys with you and not touch parasailing. And she was like, why? And I was like, because I don't fancy dying. And she was like, you're not going to die. People do it all the time. And I was like, here's the thing. People don't die all the time, but when they do, there's nothing they can do about it. And she was like, well, it doesn't happen that often and it doesn't whatever. And I was like, no, here's the thing, right? What do you like about parasailing? And she was like, you feel the wind and you're like not super high up but not super low. You can see the fish. It's pretty and I enjoy the experience. And I was like, right, awesome. I can agree with those things. Those things are cool. I'm not in love with it. I don't lust for that, but it's neat. And she was like, yeah. And I was like, the risk is 1 out of every, pick a number, 2,005, who knows? 1 out of every 2,005 people, the parachute collapses on them. They get tangled up in wires and then they fall into the water. And now you're underwater wrapped up in a parachute and harness and stuff. You will drown.
My fear is the rope breaking. Because then you...
Yeah. So there was another video. So I immediately looked at parasailing accidents to show her like what the bad side is. And one people let go and they were flying over a city. And they can't control where they're going. And they're smacking buildings and shit. It was horrific. And I was like, see, these are all other things that went wrong that I didn't even consider. I'm worried about drowning. These people just died by blunt impact to the side of a skyscraper. Like, I hadn't even considered that. But, like, generally speaking, she was like, okay, well, you know, fucking the airplanes crash every day too. And I was like, no, they don't, right? Here's the thing. In an aircraft, if you suffer a failure, you have time to fix it, right? You're at a higher altitude, so just fucking full stop. If you're parasailing or in an airplane, the airplane's at a higher altitude and gliding. Let's just say it's in a fucking nosedive, right? In a parachute, you're also nosediving if the parachute fails, right? One's higher and you have more time to take action, right? But here's the thing. In an airplane, you have a whole sequence of things to do. Why did I lose engine power? Why did I get in this fucking tailspin or whatever, right? Can I recover? If I can't, I'll eject and I have a parachute, right? And at that point, now you're in the same scenario because you have a parachute. But parachuting accidents happen so fast. You're cruising along. You're doing this. I pulled up a guy who does...
You mean skydiving, right? To clarify.
Whatever. You're in the air with a parachute on.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what it is.
Skydiving.
Yeah, skydiving. I saw another guy doing paragliding, which is where you're in that little car thing with the fan on the back, and you get up in the parachute. My dad loved this for a little while, and he stopped, thank God, because I saw a video the other day. This guy, he's flying. He's like, he built it himself.
It's an ATV, right?
Huh?
It's an ATV on a field. And he built it himself, and he has his little wings up there with a fan on the back. Is this the video you're talking about?
Is there a parachute above it?
Yes. Yeah.
Dude, so he's flying. He's like, oh my God, it's 40 miles an hour. This is awesome, right? And I counted the seconds. In 3.2 seconds, it goes, folds in on him, and he hits the ground.
Oh, wow.
And the camera keeps recording. He screams. He's paralyzed from the neck down immediately. And like mortally.
I saw a different video.
Siri, call 911. It's horrific. Right?
Yeah.
But I was like, dude, 3 seconds to what? To untangle yourself from a parachute? It's not happening. You're gonna die, right? In an airplane, you have so much more than 3 seconds usually. Even if you only have 3 seconds, you have the choice of, can I fix it or can I eject and try the parachute then? Right?
Yeah.
You have options. In a business, right? If something goes wrong, you have options. You can try to land the plane. You can check your fuel pressure. You can check your temperature gauges. You can check things. Does your landing gear still work? Lots of times there have been crash landings or emergency landings of airplanes, and everyone's been okay. You don't often hear about people falling out of the sky with a parachute failure and living. Most of them are mortally wounded or paralyzed. And that's a great analogy for working a 9-to-5 or being on a parachute and owning your own business, which is flying a plane, right? There's risk with both, but if something happens, you have far more options in an airplane crash.
Yeah.
I'll pull up this dude's accident after the podcast.
I saw another accident of the same thing. They're videoing a guy on an ATV with a propeller on the back and a little like glider parachute thing above him.
Yeah.
And he's on this field gaining speed, starts to pick up altitude. And there's this like real low profile building in the background. And it looks like he's going to clear it. But he whams into the side of this thing, and it's just like wha-bam, and it's like collapse,
fireball.
Flip over. No fireball, but it was like it was a hard impact.
Yeah,
it was like, damn.
You won the Darwin Award for don't build your own aircraft.
I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
I thought of something too while we were talking. I think part of the reason why self-employed individuals struggle to make the jump into businessmen, is that you have to in stages give up different control aspects of your business.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's not that you aren't the one making the decisions when you're in a business. It's not that you aren't calling the big shots and still have control over the direction of the business when you're a business person, but you're not like boots on the ground making every single thing, right? You have employees doing it for you. So you have to give up certain stages of control. And I think that's one thing that's hard for people coming from a self-employed aspect.
I think it's harder even before that, because to leave your job and leave that security, it's not like, oh, I make $60,000 a year at my job and I make 40 from my business, so I'll switch over. Oftentimes it's what we're doing, which is I make a great living right now and I'm about to light that on fire, get rid of it entirely, and hope that I have enough saved up to make it to my first paycheck that I earn on my own, right? And that's a scary thought. That's a scary thought, right? It's not easy to get jobs right now. And I mean, I've been trying to get you into Northrop Grumman for fucking a year, right? Yeah. It's not easy to get jobs right now. It's our only way to make money. We've never done this business before. There are so many what ifs. And I think that so many people are overwhelmed by the what ifs that they'll never make the jump. And some people make the jump and they don't make it and they hit the building, right? But some people make it. And I personally believe that we'll make it, which is why I'm taking the jump. Right? Mm-hmm. You'll never become a world champion in racing if you don't truly believe that you're the fastest person on the track, right? And just like with SAE, we're going to competition, right? We're going to make this happen. Yeah. But a lot of people have so much self-doubt and they're too afraid to lose their job, or actually not lose it, but give it up and quit to pursue these ventures. I think that's probably the biggest roadblock. I mean, in our process, that's the scariest part of it to me, is actually saying like, hey, stop feeding me money. I'm going to go try and do it on my own. It's tough.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I sympathize with people, but I mean, generally speaking, I think if you want it bad enough, then you can do it. But most people don't want it bad enough.
You can.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. Actually, this is a great fucking example for this, right? In relation to quitting your job and whatever, right? There's an Elon Musk quote. Someone was interviewing him, and they said, "Mr. Musk, do you have any inspiring words for potential investors?" And he said, if you need inspiring words, don't do it. Like, if you're not committed, like if you don't think you can do it on your own, fucking don't. Like, it's not for you. If you have doubts, don't fucking do it. You need to be like wholeheartedly in this, right? Jump in with both feet, as my grandfather used to say.
100%.
Yeah. How many more do you have?
Just one.
Okay, let me do one more then.
Cool.
Because I got 3. It's a short one. This is a Leonardo da Vinci quote. I've been reading some old philosophers' stuff too, because Hormozi says that he gets a lot of his stuff from ancient philosophers, and I'm wondering if I can draw similar parallels by also reading them. But this is a good one. It's from Leonardo da Vinci. It's God will sell you anything at the price of labor. And that essentially means if you work hard, things come to you.
Yeah.
And you will make it. And I think that a lot of people are not willing to work hard. I don't think they're afraid of it. I think that the idea of working 8 hours a day for the rest of your life and getting weekends off is manageable. It's like running a marathon. It's like a decent amount of work, not a competitive marathon, like fucking whatever, when regular dudes run marathons. It's like try a moderate amount for a long time versus the businesses that we're going into, which is like throw yourself on your sword, hurt for who knows how long. And that's the biggest issue is you don't know how long. You don't know how long.
Yeah.
So like this business might suck for us, and it might suck. It might go great in gangbusters, and 2 months after we quit our job, we're making more money than we've ever made in our life. Or it might suck, and the next 5 years are going to fucking suck figuring everything out again. But the unknown is what I think scares a lot of people. What's your next quote? What's your next quote?
Robert Kiyosaki says that starting from nothing is not an excuse. That's a quote from him.
Yeah.
And what do you say to people who blame their upbringing, their life, and their circumstances for their lack of success?
Oh, go ahead. Or is that it?
I was going to kind of tag on to that, but...
Oh, go for it. Go for it. What do you think?
I think people blame their upbringing, their life, and their circumstances for their lack of success. And so the question's a two-parter. What do you say to those people? But more specifically, what recommendations do you have for them?
Okay. Now phrase the question to the scenario to me again. What do you say to people who what?
What do you say to people who blame their upbringing, life, and circumstances on their lack of success.
Okay, you're right. And you'll never achieve the success you want, and it's not your fault. Does that feel better?
Yeah.
That's what I have to say.
Yeah. So that's why I said that my
That's a
last
great
one was kind of tied in.
That's a great one.
You
Yeah.
know?
No, that's awesome.
Yeah, I really like that Alex Hormozy quote that
do you have recommendations? Or just eat shit and grow a pair?
I used to say that I used to try and encourage those kinds of people to think differently. And what I found, or at least from my experience, is that it seems as though when you encourage those kinds of people to think differently, that positive energy of you encouraging them makes them feel better. And it makes them, for whatever reason, it makes them feel more okay to be blaming their life circumstances, right?
Yeah.
Like if someone blames, the fact that their parents were separated when they were growing up on their lack of success in business, I'll be like, like that's really tough, and like I get that, but like you could push through if you maybe you could try these few things, and like I know it's really hard, and like yeah, that stuff can be tough, and blah 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 blah, right?
Yeah.
And like at the end of that conversation, they'd probably feel better, but for whatever reason, they show me that they're more content complaining about it, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's because they get the positive reward of attention from me about their issue. They get the sympathy, right? So now it's like, I don't take as strong of a stance usually as like, no, you're right. Like, you're going to fail. What are you going to do about it, right?
It's sadistic. No one says that.
Right? Yeah. But I do like that point. I think now I kind of just ignore that conversation and I go like, yeah, like, okay, like, life is hard. Or I'll divert it and be like, yeah, life can be really challenging sometimes. Or like, circumstances can make stuff tough. Kind of like a broad stroke. I'll address it in that way.
Why do you think people are more comfortable getting your pity and attention for it? Why do you think that's what they seek?
I think, well, probably two reasons. One, I think it's the norm in our society. I think it's the norm to pity people and make them feel okay and make them feel like it's all right to, be the special snowflake who can't do it just because, blah, blah, blah happened in third grade. And then I think the other thing too is that it feels good to feel like you're heard. Like if you're complaining about a situation, it feels good to have another person be like, yeah, I understand your position, and have that sort of empathy, even if it's not, I would even consider empathy in that situation ill intention.
It's pity.
I would go as far as to say that that's making it worse, because if you're encouraging it, right, you're encouraging them to not reach their full potential and grow as a human being. And I think that is actually a negative thing to do. That's a bad friend or bad, person you're talking to. You should tell them straight, or, if you have no interest in the conversation and you don't care, just ignore it.
Right.
Don't encourage the complaining behavior. And that's something I used to do, which I've stopped doing. But, I can't remember who said the quote, but there was a quote of another entrepreneur who said that true friends will tell you straight up, even if it hurts. You know what I mean?
I think that's Chris Williamson.
Yeah, it might be. They'll just tell you the truth flat out, and I really like that concept, and I've tried to apply it and to my life and kind of change some of the vernacular I used to use to go alongside that concept more.
Yeah.
And I think it's benefited my communication with other people, or at least has narrowed down the people I talk to.
Yeah.
I
think that people value the pity and the empathy from people. People want to complain and then feel heard, not because it feels good to be heard, but because they are not succeeding in life. They are not producing. They are not winning. They are not doing well. And they're panicking because if you don't do well, people judge you. And they don't want to be judged. So they need to find a reason for why they're not doing well. And if you give them your pity and your empathy, then you're essentially telling them, it's okay. You're doing your best.
You validate the reason.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's some weak ass shit. But that's what most people do. Yeah. Right. But if people are like, I'm not doing well because of X, Y, or Z, right? And not like a fucking like functional, like, oh, I need to work harder, I'm going to work harder. But like, oh, I was born into whatever family, my dad wasn't around. Fuck you. Like that's not a fucking excuse, right? What you're doing is saying to me, I'm not succeeding and I'm not going to take responsibility for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're essentially saying that you're the special snowflake that life can't work for.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Which is, it's just factually not true. There's plenty of examples of different people from a diverse range of backgrounds with, a wide range of childhood issues that are tenfold more successful than probably any of the people watching right now.
Yeah.
And including us,
Yeah, we spoke about this last night talking about the presidential debate because I had this what's it called when I had a realization the other day, which was they're talking about we're gonna get a little political, just fucking buckle up. They're talking about
it was the presidential debate like 3 days ago, so I think it's warranted.
I honestly, I'm not a political person generally speaking, but when it comes time to vote, I need to get engaged because as a citizen, I find it my duty to be informed, to make an informed decision. But I think generally I'm pretty moderate when it comes to political position. But I had this occurrence, which was the systemic racism in the United States has, stopped a lot of people of color from succeeding in life, right? Whatever. Whatever that phrase is, not whatever, it's a problem.
Yeah.
And I had this, they are, what's the policy? They're giving $10,000 to first-time home buyers.
Yeah. So Biden implemented a policy that specifically Black families that are first-time home buyers receive a $10,000 tax credit.
Yeah, that's huge. That's a big thing, right?
Yeah.
And I had this occurrence to me, which was how many generations have gone by since the segregation movement in the 1960s, right? And Sandra and I did the math. It's 3 generations, if not 4.
Yeah.
And I had this recollection, which was, I'm trying to keep names out of this, but in a family that I know, it's the next generation up for me. So like our parents' generation, right? 2 brothers grew up in the same family. They didn't have enough money to buy a pot to piss in. They moved around the country all the time. Their parents were in the military, and they had a pretty rough upbringing, right? One of them, so like fucking starting at ground zero, right?
Yeah.
Like let's just pretend that their parents were a part of the segregation movement, right? Starting at ground zero. One of them went to school, got good grades, went to college, became an engineer, and now is living in the upper middle class. His brother went to school, fucked around, got addicted to drugs, served time in prison, and is working at a Wendy's right now.
Yeah.
Same family, same base level. And my thought there is if they started from nothing, like that just perfectly illustrates that you can go in the positive or negative direction in the span of 1 generation. And if there's been 3 or 4 generations since then, that's 4 opportunities for you to turn it around. And if you haven't turned it around by now, there's a bigger issue at large here, right?
Well, if you really want to, scale it too, there have been even more generations, since the Civil War.
Yeah.
Right? Sorry, not the Civil Rights Movement, the Civil War, right? And of course, there was a lack of inequality coming up to the Civil Rights Movement, which then attempted to resolve through successive laws and social reform to get to a place where we are today. But it's like, it only takes one person and one family to really make a change, right? And so I think it's sad because there's a social reward in certain cultures, in white culture, in Black culture, in Hispanic culture, in Asian culture. In every single different group, there are certain actions that are rewarded, whether negative or positive, by social norms and social culture. And some of those can be pros and some of those can be cons. And I don't think that we should just tear apart culture and try to, create a melting pot that's a middle of the road. But I think it's important to recognize what is progressing you to a better place and what is holding you back.
Right.
And I think it's sad because I think there's a lack of recognition in that, in, some groups of people versus others. And obviously there's, a variety of things that are holding back a variety of different people. It's just, different challenges for different folks.
Right.
But the point being is that you could really make a huge change in 1 generation.
Yeah.
If you just thought critically about the actions you're making and why you're doing them, regardless of your race, regardless of your upbringing.
Yeah. If your culture promotes non-material goods and, not working class jobs and everybody should share everything or whatever, and it doesn't promote working, like let's say this fictional culture, it's the societal norm in that culture to look down on people who work. You shouldn't work, right? You can't set the goal of being in tune with your culture and also being wealthy because it goes against your culture. You've got to pick one. You can't have both. Right. That's a fictional culture. I'm not calling out a specific one, but generally speaking, that's the point that I'm trying to make there. But additionally, I thought about this while you spoke, because to say that in one generation, so a family could turn their lives around 1 year after the Civil War, I think is just wrong. I think it's outrageous. I don't think that's possible.
No, I don't think it is either.
Yeah. But I don't think it's possible even right after the suffrage movement either, like civil rights, right?
Yeah.
But I think that a generation after
suffrage and civil rights were different. But
that's women's suffrage.
Yeah,
right? They were both suffrage. Whatever. Maybe not
proper use of that word.
Maybe not the year after or 2 years after or 5 years after, but the generation after, absolutely. And after that, absolutely.
Yeah.
And nowadays, with diversity hires and technology, which is the great equalizer, and these $10,000 benefit packages and everything, like I genuinely believe if my parents' generation could do it, then this generation can do it. And I don't think this is an excuse for anybody.
Yeah.
And this ties into my last quote of the day.
Real quick, if I may.
Yes.
The point I was making with the time after the Civil War wasn't to say that I think African American folk in America should be at the same place as white people, a year after. Right?
No.
My point being is that still today, in today's politics, it is brought up frequently that because of the 1800s and the 1700s, we have issues that still lie today, right? It is a direct blame to that time frame. And I understand that there's, a repercussions from that time period that channel through, couple or several generations after. But the point I'm trying to make is that today, now in this generation, there are great opportunities for whatever race or culture you come from.
Yeah.
And that's the point I'm trying to make.
It's like saying every American suffers now because we were taxed so heavily prior to the Revolutionary War. I was talking to a good friend the other day. They made this great point, which is you hear a lot of people of color complain about slavery and the implications that it has on them societally today, right? You do not hear a lot of Jewish people talking about it from the Holocaust.
Yeah, you don't. Or, another thing too is that you don't hear people from Japan complain about the bombing.
Yeah.
Like, when's the last time you saw someone who was Japanese out and about and they're like, man, I fucking hate you white Americans. You drop nuclear bomb or atom bombs on our country. You just don't care because there's a culture around pushing through, right?
Yeah.
And actually, Asian women, I heard this statistic the other day too, Asian women are outperforming white women when it comes to salary in jobs overall.
I think all Asian people.
I think so too. But this podcast was specifically about women, so I don't want to group it because I don't have the knowledge for that. I don't have the base. I think so too. But specifically, Asian women are outperforming white women, right? And you could go back to the 1900s when there was not quite concentration camps, but similar to concentration camps in California, Oregon, Washington. There were groups where they collected Asian people during the communist scare
in the 60s.
Yes. In the U.S. there was.
Wow.
I think it was earlier.
I remember these. They were called camps.
It was earlier than the 60s because this was regarding World War II. So this was like 30s and 40s. Oh. And there were camps where they brought in people from China or Japan, and there was a racist aspect to it, and part of the reason that they picked on Japanese people or Asian people specifically is that they're easier to tell apart from a German person versus an American white person, right? That can be a tough distinction to make, but someone who's Asian has different physical features that's easier to distinguish. Yeah. And that's why those concentration camps were made for those people. And you could be a Japanese person today and go, well, 4 generations ago, my father had his business shut down, which was a common event, and then was thrown into this concentration camp and made to work in these, fields and in these deserts in the middle of rural nowhere, right?
Yeah.
Because that's a real thing that happened in the US to that group of people, but you don't hear them complain about it. And they are at the top of the performance chain in terms of salary today in the United States. Right. And so the point I'm making is that we have great opportunities today. We can dwell on the past, but it doesn't help our future. Right. It's important to recognize the past. It's important to learn from the past. It's important to understand why we got to the positions we did and try to take steps to not get ourselves into that place again. But to complain about it doesn't change the fact today.
Right. And that's my last quote, which caps this off beautifully. It's a Kiyosaki quote. This is not a fair country. We are a free country. There are people who work harder, are smarter, and are more driven for success, are more talented, or more desirous of the good life than others. In America, we are free to pursue those ambitions if we have the determination.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at
God
that.
bless this country.
Amen. 4th of July next week. We're going to do an extra long episode for 4th. That's all I got.
Cool. Me too. Thank you very much for watching. Really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed the content today, and follow, subscribe, and let us know what you'd like to hear more of.